Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. We arrived in the Wilmslow area. Wilmslow is a place that we lived for 4 years in the UK. It's just south of Manchester. It's in the county of Cheshire. It's a very nice part of the world, actually. I'll talk a little bit more about Wilmslow in a future Short Funk recording. But rather than go into Wilmslow and spend an evening in Wilmslow, my wife had a particular plan that we would go to the Trafford Centre. Now, the Trafford Centre, when we lived in the UK, was like, it was a shopping mall. It was a substantial shopping mall that we used to visit periodically, and I think actually reminded my wife some aspect of home. You know, shopping malls are pretty big in the US, and this was a pretty big shopping mall. In the Trafford Centre, and I've talked about this occasionally associated with malls, there are a couple of shops that I could go to where I felt relatively comfortable. There were a couple of good newsagents where I could pick up independent magazines and things like that. And in general, I had my very specific places in the Trafford Centre. I'd managed to kink my back at somewhere through this early part of the journey, and I was walking rather strangely when we turned up at the Trafford Centre and went in. And I realised relatively quickly that there was actually nothing for me in the Trafford Centre. The Games Workshop that had been there, the train shop had been there, no longer there, replaced by kind of designer brand shops, which basically also permeated our experience in London. Folks in London mentioned that the Olympics had changed things in London, and a lot of the quainter older shops where you could buy china and this kind of stuff that we used to love going into when we went down to London, no longer there, replaced with Gucci and a variety of other brand names, which completely skipped my mind at the time of recording. The Trafford Centre was relatively similar. In fact, I spent a majority of my time at the Trafford Centre while my wife went off to look for favourite stores of hers, going to a W.H. Smith, which is a newsagent, and buying packing boxes in order to send stuff back to us here in the US. And that experience was somewhat surreal because W.H. Smith in the Trafford Centre, at least, in fact, in most of the locations that I went to while I was in the UK, didn't have any personnel, like, checking you out. It had automated scanning machines, which you get in supermarkets here periodically, but I'd never actually seen in a newsagent setting previously. The highlight of this trip to W.H. Smith to buy the packing boxes was that I needed the agent, the W.H. Smith employee, 5 times through this, roughly once for each item that I was purchasing, for a variety of different reasons, mainly because initially something had been entered in, which meant that it needed to be cleared, and the assistant just disappeared at that point of time. So the whole time in W.H. Smith was considerably longer than it needed to be, and it reinforced the kind of lunacy of not having people in a position like that, and when having, occasional people, occasional employees in the environment, they really were relatively useless and disappeared very rapidly for me then to wait for them to come back and actually finish what they'd started. All in all, the Trafford Centre made me feel very uneasy. It reminded me of some of the worst aspects of living in the Wilmslow area. It was a period of time for me, not of great consumerism, but certainly of a lot of incidental purchases to just try and ease things along, and it wasn't really a space that had particularly good karma for me. I didn't really want to be there, but, it was part of my wife's what she wanted to go and see, so I tagged along, and really it left me feeling a little bit uneasy associated with my time that was going to be spent in Wilmslow the next day. But you'll have to see how this turns out in a future Short Funk recording. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.